Beneath the overcast skies of Montana, where freezing winds howled through the ancient forests, stood the Yellowstone Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. This was more than just a rescue station. It was a pioneering hub for the study and conservation of rare wildlife, especially North American black bears. Dr. Ethan Caldwell, a wildlife veterinary expert with over 20 years of experience, stood silently before the observation window. His sharp eyes were fixed on the figure of a pregnant black bear resting in the corner of the isolation enclosure. The bear, named Maya, was no ordinary specimen. Strong, intelligent, and shrouded in mystery, she had been brought to the center 4 months ago after being found wandering alone in a remote forest. Initial biological assessments confirmed her pregnancy, but from the very beginning, Dr. Caldwell had sensed something unusual. This winter had been more brutal than ever before. A raging snowstorm had swept through the sanctuary, blanketing everything in an unforgiving white abyss. Inside the monitoring room, surveillance screens tracked Maya's every movement. The bear had begun showing signs of labor, and the medical team was bracing for what they anticipated to be a challenging birth. But no one could have foreseen what was about to unfold. They were about to witness an event so unprecedented that it would forever change everything they thought they knew about black bears and wildlife medicine itself. Outside, the snowstorm howled mercilessly, gusts of icy wind carrying thick layers of snow that blanketed every path within the Yellowstone Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Inside the observation room, tension hung heavy in the air. Dr. Ethan Caldwell and his team kept their eyes locked on the isolation enclosure, where Maya, the black bear mother, was struggling through the intense pains of labor. Since being brought to the sanctuary, Maya had remained wary of humans, always keeping her distance. But tonight, she was entirely focused on a single mission, bringing her cubs into the world. Under the dim glow of the monitoring lights, her sleek black fur was damp with moisture and sweat as the contractions grew stronger. A low growl rumbled from Maya as she summoned all her strength. A moment later, a tiny cub emerged into the world. A weak but determined cry filled the room as the newborn took its first breath. The team watched closely through the monitoring screens, documenting every vital sign. Within minutes, a second cub arrived, followed by a third, and then a fourth. The birth of 4 cubs was already an extraordinarily rare event for a black bear, but the miracle was far from over. Maya trembled violently, her entire body shaking as a 5th cube was born. In over 20 years of wildlife veterinary experience, Dr. Caldwell had only ever read about such cases in a handful of rare reports, but he had never witnessed it firsthand. 5 healthy cubs, all surviving. It was a phenomenon, a miracle of nature. The entire medical team sat frozen in a mix of astonishment and quiet joy. The cubs, though tiny, were full of life, instinctively clinging to their mother's body, seeking warmth. Maya gently licked each of her newborns, tending to them with maternal care. It was an incredibly heartwarming sight, a moment of life triumphing against the bitter cold of the night. But then something unimaginable happened. Just as the team believed the labor was complete, an unexpected anomaly occurred. Maya was still experiencing contractions. The monitoring equipment displayed elevated heart rates and continued labor patterns, signs that the birth was not yet over. Dr. Caldwell frowned. "That's impossible," he muttered. Sarah Parker, the sanctuary's veterinary nurse, quickly checked the thermal imaging data. She shook her head, bewildered. "Dr. Caldwell, the contractions, they're still strong, just like before the first 5 cubs were born." The room fell into absolute silence. A black bear giving birth to 6 cubs? That had never been documented in any scientific record. All eyes were glued to the monitoring screen as Maya suddenly let out another deep growl, her entire body tensing up once more. Dr. Caldwell felt a chill creep down his spine as a realization hit him. This was no ordinary birth. Maya wasn't just giving birth to another cub. She was about to bring something into the world that defied every known law of wildlife biology. The next few minutes would forever change their understanding of nature itself. Maya let out a deep, agonized roar, her entire body trembling violently as the contractions continued, stronger than ever. 5 cubs had already been born, all healthy, but the medical monitors showed a shocking reality. The labor wasn't over. "This isn't normal," Dr. Ethan Caldwell muttered, his eyes glued to the surveillance screen. Inside the Yellowstone Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, tension gripped the entire medical team. Maya rolled onto her side, her massive paws clawing at the bedding of dry straw, her body writhing under immense strain. The way she moved, her breathing shallow, her muscles tensed, made it clear to everyone. She was in danger. Sarah Parker, a veterinary nurse with over 10 years of experience, quickly checked Maya's vitals on the monitoring system. Her heart rate had spiked dangerously high. Her body temperature was abnormally elevated. Signs of exhaustion and distress were rapidly escalating. "If this pain continues too long, she could go into post-birth shock," Sarah warned, voice tight with urgency. "We can't just stand here," Dr. Caldwell barked. "Prepare for intervention if necessary." The team sprang into action, positioning themselves for an emergency response. A rescue kit was immediately set up outside the isolation enclosure, including specialized pain relief medication for large wildlife, oxygen support equipment in case of respiratory distress, airman surgical tools should a medical intervention become unavoidable. Maya groaned softly, her exhausted growls filling the enclosure. But what stunned everyone was not just Maya's struggle. It was the reaction of her newborn cubs. In a typical birth, newborns would be restless, frightened, disoriented by their first moments in the world. But these 5 cubs remained calm. They huddled closely around Maya, emitting soft chirping sounds, almost as if they sensed what was coming next. "Look at that," Sarah whispered. On the surveillance monitor, something was appearing beneath Maya's trembling body. Maya gritted her teeth, her entire body tensing once more. The observation room fell into absolute silence as another tiny form slowly emerged beneath her. But it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Its fur wasn't black, it was silver, shimmering faintly under the dim lights, completely different from its siblings. It was nearly twice the size of the other cubs, its body robust, powerful, unnatural. Most shocking of all, its eyes. Unlike all other newborn bear cubs whose eyes remained tightly shut for weeks after birth, this cub's eyes were already open. A deep, unnerving shade of amber glowed from within them. Dr. Caldwell gasped, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. Everything they knew about wildlife biology had just been shattered. Despite her exhaustion, Maya immediately lifted her massive head, her dark eyes locking onto the silver-furred cub. The entire team held their breath, fearing she might reject this strange, unnatural offspring. But instead she did something no one expected. With slow, deliberate movements, Maya leaned in and gently nuzzled the newborn, licking it clean just as she had done with the others. "Is accepting it," Sarah murmured in disbelief. A ripple of shock and awe spread through the room. A creature that shouldn't exist had just been welcomed into the world, not as an anomaly, but as part of Maya's family. But even as the tension eased, one overwhelming question remained. What exactly was this 6th cub? And more importantly, why did it exist? Inside the observation room, no one dared to breathe. The 6th cub with its rare silver fur lay trembling beside Maya. Although the mother bear had accepted it, another issue was becoming dangerously clear. The cub was barely moving, unlike its siblings. Dr. Ethan Caldwell frowned as he monitored the vital signs on the screen. The cub's heart rate was too slow, and its body temperature was dropping at an alarming rate. This was unlike any birth he had ever witnessed. "It's losing body heat too fast," Sarah Parker, the veterinary nurse, shouted. Maya let out a low growl, sensing that something was wrong with her unusual cub. She lowered her massive body, attempting to warm it with her own heat. But the temperature inside the enclosure wasn't enough. This cub needed immediate intervention. Underscore 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 underscore. There was no time to hesitate. If they didn't act now, the silver cub wouldn't survive the night. "We need to get it into an incubator immediately," Dr. Caldwell ordered. But the situation wasn't that simple. How could they take the cub without triggering Maya's protective instincts? "We can't force this," Sarah said urgently. "If Maya feels threatened, she'll become dangerously aggressive." Ethan knew she was right. Maya was still a wild bear, and no matter how long she had been in their care, her instincts would always be to protect her cubs. If anyone entered the enclosure and tried to take the cub, the consequences could be catastrophic. They needed another way. Underscore 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 underscore. "Ah, kutite polka. Ba. Ba, ba." Sarah stepped forward and knelt near the glass partition. She knew Maya had become more familiar with her than with anyone else. Slowly, she raised a hand and pressed it gently against the glass, speaking in a calm, soothing voice. "Maya, I know you understand us. We just want to help your cub." Inside the enclosure, Maya's amber eyes locked onto Sarah's. The entire room held their breath. No one knew if Maya would understand. And then something unthinkable happened. Maya, with deliberate care, gently nudged the silver cub toward the enclosure door. Dr. Caldwell froze in shock. No one in the room could believe what they were seeing. A wild mother bear willingly handing over her cub to humans? "This can't be real," one of the technicians whispered. Sarah knew she had to act fast. She carefully unlocked the enclosure door, not stepping inside but extending both hands outward. Maya looked at her once more, then, with incredible gentleness, she placed the silver cub into Sarah's waiting hands. The entire observation team gasped in disbelief. Underscore 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 industrial ongoing. Obtain a physical exam. Under discretionary, under step bank, under bank, under medical center, and under school. Without wasting a second, Sarah and Dr. Caldwell rushed the silver cube into the Wildlife Emergency Care Unit. They quickly placed it inside a specialized incubator, using infrared heating systems to raise its body temperature while monitoring its breathing and circulation. "Heart rate is still weak," a veterinary doctor reported. The tension in the room was palpable. Nurses continued to adjust oxygen levels and heat exposure. The tiny cub let out a faint whimper, a sign that there was still hope. Sarah clenched her fists, silently praying for a miracle. And then, a tiny sound filled the room. The cub's breathing became steady. It had survived. The entire team exhaled in relief, but there was still one major question left unanswered. Was this silver cub just a genetic mutation? Or was it something the world had never seen before? Even though the silver cub had survived its critical moment, the situation was far from safe. Its body was still weak, its temperature barely above the minimum threshold for survival. The heart rate had stabilized, but it was still slower than normal. No one in the room took their eyes off the monitoring screens. Every small fluctuation in the cub's vitals could signal an imminent danger. Sarah Parker sat close to the incubator, her hands clenched into fists. In all her years as a veterinary nurse, she had never felt this kind of tension. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the cub might not make it. Outside, Maya still waited. The mother bear never took her eyes off the medical unit, her massive body motionless, yet filled with worry. There were no growls, no signs of aggression, only patience and understanding. Maya knew her cub was being helped. But a greater danger loomed on the horizon. A powerful snowstorm was approaching. Dr. Ethan Caldwell held the radio transmitter tightly as the weather station's alert came through. The storm will hit in 3 hours. Temperatures will drop to -40 dF, and snowfall could completely bury the area overnight. The entire team froze. If the cub wasn't strong enough before the storm arrived, returning it to Maya could be too dangerous. If they kept it too long, Maya might lose patience and try to break in to get her cub back. "We have to decide now," Caldwell said, his voice tight with urgency. "Keeping the cub for a few more hours is safer for it, but it also increases the risk of losing control over the situation." Sarah looked at the silver cub, then back at Maya. She knew this wasn't just a medical decision. This was a matter of survival. Sarah checked the cub's vitals one last time before making the call. Heart rate, body temperature now within the safe range. Breathing, still weak but showing improvement. The cub was strong enough to leave the incubator. Sarah turned to Caldwell. "We need to return it to Maya right now. If we wait any longer, the storm will make everything worse." Caldwell hesitated for just a second, then nodded. "All right. But we have to be extremely careful." The team prepared a special heat-insulated carrier to protect the cub from the freezing temperatures. Then they headed toward Maya's enclosure. The moment they arrived, Maya immediately sensed their presence. She took a step forward, her golden eyes filled with alertness. The enclosure door was cracked open just slightly. Sarah knelt down without stepping inside, gently placing the carrier box at the entrance. She took a deep breath, then slowly lifted the lid. Inside, the silver cub stirred. Maya stared intensely, and then she did something that made everyone hold their breath. She moved forward cautiously, lowering her massive head toward the carrier. There was no growl, no panic, only gentleness. Maya leaned in and nudged the cub softly before doing what no one expected. She carefully gripped the cub's scruff and lifted it into her embrace. Caldwell exhaled deeply. Sarah nearly felt tears of relief. The silver cub was back with its mother. But just at that moment, the howling winds intensified. The snowstorm arrived earlier than expected. They needed to move Maya and her cubs to a safer area inside the enclosure, fast. If they didn't, they could all become trapped in the storm. Sarah and Caldwell stepped back, giving Maya the space to decide. They knew she needed a signal to understand that she and her cubs could move to the shelter. Sarah whispered, "Come on, Maya, take them somewhere safe." For a moment, the tension was unbearable. No one knew if Maya understood. But then, she turned. She held the silver cub close and began leading her cubs toward the shelter. A powerful gust of wind slammed through the area. The enclosure door shut just in time as the blizzard raged outside. The team let out a breath of relief. They had done it. The silver cub was back with its family, and the entire bear family was now safe from the deadly storm. But deep inside, Sarah knew this was only the beginning of the silver cub story. The blizzard raged over Montana for 2 straight days and nights, burying everything in a thick layer of white and freezing the very essence of life. But inside the sanctuary's shelter, Maya and her cubs remained safe. The research team barely left their observation monitors. They watched as Maya held her silver cub tightly, her most extraordinary child. Wrapping it in her warm fur to keep it safe, the other cubs nestled close together, forming a small circle of life, defying the deadly cold outside. 2 days later, when the storm finally subsided, Sarah Parker and Dr. Ethan Caldwell were finally able to enter the enclosure to check on Maya and her cubs. Maya, though exhausted, still stood watchful as they approached, but what shocked the entire team was the silver cub. In just 48 hours, it was no longer weak. Instead of lying motionless like when it was first placed in the incubator, the silver cub now lifted its head, its amber eyes wide and glowing with strength. It had survived the thin line between life and death, and now it seemed stronger than all the other cubs. Sarah stood frozen. This was more than just a successful rescue. This was a miracle. "I can't believe it. It recovered this fast?" Caldwell murmured, his hands shaking slightly as he checked the cub's heartbeat. "It's stronger than normal?" Sarah nodded slowly. The silver cub hadn't just survived, it was thriving in a way that defied everything science had ever recorded. But something even more remarkable had changed between Maya and the people at the sanctuary. She no longer feared them. Before, whenever humans approached, Maya had always been on high alert. Her golden eyes sharp, her massive body tense, always ready to protect her cubs. But now, she didn't react that way anymore. She simply stood there, watching, and when Sarah reached out to check on the silver cub, Maya didn't flinch. She trusted them. A wild bear, once driven by instinct to defend at all costs, had changed. She knew these humans had saved her child. Caldwell looked at Sarah and chuckled. "I think we've done something far bigger than just saving a bear." Sarah smiled softly, resting a hand against the glass, watching Maya and her cubs sleep peacefully. "We've proven that humans and nature can exist together, not out of fear but out of trust." 3 weeks later, Maya and her cubs were finally strong enough to return to the wild. The entire team worked together to find a safe forest, far from hunting zones, where Maya could raise her cubs without danger. On the day of their release, everyone at the sanctuary gathered to witness the moment. As the gate opened, Maya turned back one last time. Not with the fearful or suspicious eyes she once had, but with a calm, knowing gaze. The silver cub stayed close by her side, its amber eyes glinting under the winter sun. Caldwell stood still, watching as the bear family disappeared into the snow-covered trees. Sarah let out a slow breath and whispered, "This isn't the end, it's only the beginning." And none of them knew that one day the silver cub would grow up to become something truly extraordinary, a symbol of nature's resilience, a legend in the making. And its story would be told for generations to come. The blizzard had passed, but the impact of what had happened at the Montana Wildlife Rescue Center would last forever. Maya and her cubs had returned to the wild, but those who remained at the center, Sarah, Caldwell, and the entire rescue team, would never be the same again. After Maya was released, the story of the silver cub quickly spread. Scientists, conservationists, and nature enthusiasts all turned their attention to the sanctuary, eager to learn about one of the most extraordinary bear births ever recorded. The data collected on the silver cub left experts stunned. Not only had it recovered faster than its siblings, but it also displayed biological traits beyond the standard for North American black bears. Dr. Caldwell and his research team launched a series of studies to investigate further. Luna, the name Sarah had given the silver cub, was not just a rare anomaly. It posed new questions about evolution, adaptation, and the mysteries of wildlife. More importantly, This event changed how the military and researchers viewed wildlife. What was once seen as a potential threat was now recognized as a vital part of the ecosystem, one that needed to be protected more carefully. The center's policies also evolved, focusing more on helping wildlife adapt and thrive sustainably, rather than just rescuing and releasing them back into the wild. The silver cub's birth challenged existing beliefs and forced humanity to reconsider its role in protecting nature. Looking back, no one on the team would ever forget the moment Maya trusted them, or the moment Luna opened its eyes for the first time. This was not just a story of rescue. It was a testament to the bond between humans and nature. Sarah gazed toward the distant forest, where Maya and her cubs now roamed free. Maybe one day they would cross paths again. And if that day came, she was certain Maya would not be a stranger anymore, but rather a part of the story they had written together.